Are you stuck on Act 2? It's often the hardest section to write, not only because it's the longest part of your novel, but also because it's where the most memorable scenes take place. You know, the juicy ones your readers yearn for. So, how do you deliver the goods and keep up the momentum? Hi, I'm Deborah Fraze. Welcome to Novel Planning Part 4. Last episode, we took a deep dive into Act 1. Today, we'll explore Act 2, the middle of your novel, using examples from The Hunger Games, Lessons in Chemistry, and The Kite Runner. Act 2 makes up 50% of your novel and throws your hero into an upside-down world. Everything that takes place here tests them and forces them to change. Because it covers so much territory, looking at Act 2 in 4 segments or chunks makes it easier to manage the action and tension. So we begin with Segment 3 and Beat 3, the first move. Up to this point, your hero has been bouncing around in reactionary mode. As the pressure builds, they need to do something more. In The Hunger Games, the capital's opulence and obsession with appearances shocks Katniss. Preferring to keep to herself, she's not interested in playing it up for the cameras that are going to be recording every moment of the games. However, she quickly learns the right facade could be the key to her survival. It's the only way to attract sponsor support and survival necessities throughout the games. So reluctantly, she pretends to be in a romantic relationship with Peeta. His easygoing acceptance of the pretense unsettles her, though. How on earth can she kill him if he doesn't kill her first? In Lessons in Chemistry, Elizabeth Zott is restless without work, so she turns her kitchen into a lab. Former colleagues start coming to her for advice regarding various chemistry problems, and that generates a small income. Her pregnancy did not magically disappear as she'd hoped, and she's almost due, so she finally visits an obstetrician. In The Kite Runner, Amir sets Hassan up for an accusation of theft to get him sent away. Much to Amir's astonishment, Hassan accepts responsibility. Even though Baba forgives Hassan, Hassan and his father refuse to stay. Fast forward 5 years, and the rest of the segment follows Amir and Baba as they leave Soviet-occupied Afghanistan for California. Once there, they settle into a community of other Afghan refugees. Amir hopes he can finally put his guilty thoughts aside. He decides to become a writer and meets the love of his life, Soraya. Up next, Beat 4, the first blindside. As your hero adjusts to the results of their first move, the antagonist, whether human or situational, strikes. This moment reminds your hero of the stakes and forces them to confront a deeper layer of conflict. Often this beat carries emotional weight such as betrayal or loss, and reveals the complexity of the situation. The Hunger Games begin with a brutal bloodbath far worse than anything Katniss expected. Cannons blast, announcing the deaths of nearly half the tributes. Katniss escapes with a few supplies, but she's later burned, escaping a fire set by the Capitol. She ends up stuck in a tree, cornered by the careers, a group of well-trained tributes. Rue, a young tribute who reminds Katniss of her sister Prim, helps Katniss escape by pointing to a tracker-jacker nest. Katniss topples it onto the careers. Unfortunately, she suffers debilitating stings as a result. In Lessons in Chemistry, Elizabeth is completely unprepared for the demands of an infant, a creature who seems immune to scientific method, and she falls apart. Fortunately, her neighbor, Mrs. Harriet Sloane, shows up to help and encourage her. Fast forward a year, and Elizabeth and her daughter, Mad, are doing well, thanks to Harriet's support. But money is tight, so Elizabeth goes back to Hastings and asks for her old job. She gets it. In The Kite Runner, Baba is diagnosed with lung cancer. As Amir cares for Baba, he decides to marry Soraya. But before she will agree, she insists on sharing dark secrets from her past. Despite her openness, Amir cannot bring himself to share his own dark secrets. The two marry after a short engagement, and Baba dies shortly after the wedding. Now we're at the midpoint of your novel with Beat 5, Realization Dawns. At the midpoint of Act 2, your hero begins to shift from reacting to strategizing. It's a significant turning point in their journey, prompting them to take more deliberate actions and gain a deeper understanding of themselves and their situation. At the Act 2 midpoint of The Hunger Games, Katniss begins to trust someone else. She teams up with Rue, who not only helped her escape the careers, but helped her heal the vicious stings she suffered. Together, they destroy the careers' food stash, which shifts the power dynamics and leaves the careers vulnerable. At the same time, Katniss learns Peeta was severely injured by one of the careers and left for dead. More cannon blasts announce more deaths. Is Peeta one of them? In Lessons in Chemistry, Elizabeth learns her boss at Hastings has stolen her research and published it as his own. On principle, she quits. She accepts a role as a TV cooking show host, and she puts her own spin on it, framing food preparation around lessons in chemistry. The show becomes a hit, except with the studio's executive producer, who rages at her and attempts assault. He ends up in the hospital from a heart attack. Walter, the new executive producer and the man who hired Elizabeth, gives her the run of the show. Ratings soar until she acknowledges on air that she is an atheist. Sponsors threaten to pull out. A bomb is planted in the studio. Walter encourages her to share her story in Life magazine to regain public trust. Reluctantly, she agrees and opens up to the reporter about her life and priorities. Impressed by her resilience, the reporter decides to write an article solely focused on her achievements and goals. In The Kite Runner, Baba's funeral shows Amir how much people loved his father, even though he wasn't perfect. Maybe Amir doesn't have to be perfect either. 10 years later, and still childless, he visits his old friend Rahim, who's now in Pakistan and dying. Rahim brings Amir up to date on Hassan, who was murdered with his wife. Their young son, Sarab, is now in a Kabul orphanage under Taliban control. Rahim wants Amir to rescue the boy, and Amir struggles. Should he risk his life to rescue Sarab, or die a coward? He decides to pay someone else to do it. With Beat 6, the second blind side finds us 3/4 of the way through Act 2. Your hero faces a devastating blow that pushes them to their breaking point. The second blind side heightens the stakes and deepens your hero's commitment to the cause. In The Hunger Games, Rue is killed by a spear. Katniss avenges her by killing the attacker. Her grief fuels her anger toward the capital and strengthens her resolve to survive, not just for herself, but to defy the system. She is beginning to feel her power. The capital suddenly changes the rules. If the two last survivors are from the same district, they both win. Katniss finds Peeta with a high fever and a grave leg injury. She does what she can to help him heal, but it just isn't enough. Their relationship deepens. Still in terrible shape, Peeta almost eats poison berries. Katniss stops him and keeps them in case they might come in handy against Cato, who is now the only other remaining tribute. In Lessons in Chemistry, Elizabeth's Life magazine cover story misrepresents her as a bimbo. The editor didn't like the reporter's version and completely rewrote it. While her show's ratings soar, Elizabeth is devastated by the blow to her credibility. In The Kite Runner, Rahim reveals the heart-wrenching truth. Hassan was Amir's half-brother, and Sarab is his nephew. This revelation shakes Amir to the core. He betrayed his own brother, and he storms away. When his thoughts have time to settle, he sees a way to redeem his past. Terrified but determined, Amir travels to Kabul to rescue Sarab. A lot happens in Act 2. If you've read any of these books, you'll know we're only skimming the surface. Yet these key details illustrate how tension rises and events collide to create story form. Does this study of Act 2 shift your perspectives of your own second act and what you might achieve? As you continue planning, remember it's not necessarily about fleshing out all the details. It's about looking for the beats that provoke your characters and spark the kinds of emotional tension that shape a powerful story. Find those beats, and you'll have no problem delivering the goods in Act 2. Your ideas will expand and deepen as you write. Next episode, we dive into Act 3 and the 2 segments that bring your story home. Until then, have fun with the process. And write, writer, write.